Hey, how are you going? Hope you're having a great day. You are listening to Extra Healthyish, the big sister podcast to Healthyish. Actually, both podcasts are from Body+Soul. And yes, I host both of them. My name is Felicity Harley. Now, did you know this? 1 in 7 Australians suffer from irritable bowel syndrome, otherwise known as IBS. And often it can be a frustrating and harrowing journey to figure out what the hell is going on with your gut. Well, one of the key interventions for IBS is actually the low-FODMAP diet, but it can be very confusing to navigate. Dietitian and gut health expert Chloe McLeod joins me via Zoom from Adelaide to help us make sense of it all. Chloe, nice to have you on Extra Healthyish. Thank you for coming on. Now tell me, how do you stay extra healthyish in your life?
That's such a good question. Key things that I do, number one is I make sure that my nutrition intake or my food intake is pretty healthy most days. Of course, I have my less healthy things that I love to include, but most of the time it's pretty healthy. I incorporate movement every day, whether it's simply going for a walk or whether it's going for a run or Pilates or doing something else. But I know particularly from a mental health perspective, including movement in my day helps me retain that clarity and helps me to feel good. I used to say sleep. I have 2 little kids now, so
no sleep
sleep has fallen by the wayside a little bit. But I think it's making the most of time when you are able to sleep, and if you can sneak a little nap in here and there, then fitting that in sometimes too.
Yeah, giving yourself permission to nap. I think sometimes, especially as women, we think that, if we've got 2 hours in the afternoon when they might be sleeping, or that we need to run around and do things, but it is okay just to have a nap.
So okay to have a nap.
Now, we're talking about gut health, particularly irritable bowel syndrome and the FODMAP diet in dealing with this. Can you just tell us a bit about what irritable bowel syndrome is and perhaps some of the signs and symptoms of it?
Of course. So IBS, or irritable bowel syndrome, it's a functional gut disorder. Now, it's characterized by symptoms such as bloating, distension, constipation or diarrhea, or a mix of both of them, incomplete bowel movements, and sometimes abdominal pain, excessive flatulence. So all symptoms of a uncomfortable, unhappy gut is the name of the game when it comes to IBS.
What about food? Is there particular foods that can trigger these symptoms?
There certainly is. So if we look at the most commonly used dietary change for IBS, it is incorporating a low FODMAP diet. So FODMAP stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols.
I'm glad you said that because I wasn't going to say that.
You can see why there's an acronym, right?
Yes.
So high FODMAP foods can significantly contribute to symptoms of IBS. There are other foods outside of FODMAPs that can play a role as well, though, of course. So things like chili, coffee, just wheat and dairy in general can be, both of those fall under FODMAPs as well, but can be an issue sort of in their own right. And alcohol are all food-related things that can cause a problem with IBS as well. But FODMAPs are one of the tools of the trade, I suppose, that us dietitians will use when we're working with patients with IBS as a way of helping to mitigate symptoms.
Now, we'll get to the actual FODMAP diet and breaking that down in a minute, but there's some other lifestyle triggers that can impact gut health, because often, people can go on and everything's okay, their gut's healthy, they're not having any issues, and then wham, suddenly bloating. What's some other triggers that might be responsible for unhealthy gut?
Yeah, so I think the biggest one is stress. So when we're stressed, this plays a key role in what's going on in our gut. We've got our gut-brain axis where we know that our gut and our brain are constantly in communication with each other. And the example that I always like to use is, when you're like feeling a little bit nervous, get some butterflies in your stomach, maybe you're about to jump on a podcast, that's actually a sign that your brain is speaking to your gut, because you're getting that physical manifestation of stress with the butterflies in your stomach. And with IBS, it's the same. It's just sort of on steroids. It's your gut is having this symptomatic reaction to the stress that your body is feeling. And I often liken it to, you go on a holiday to Italy and, you're sitting by the pool and you're having a great old time, and you're not noticing.
Bring on more holidays to Italy.
You're not noticing any of these gut-related symptoms at all. However, you're in your daily life, stressful, you've got long work hours, maybe you're working from home and the kids are there as well. It's all very difficult. And so these symptoms can be quite pronounced compared to when you're in a much more relaxed state.
So it is the stress, if the stress lingers, the gut health will linger. If you stop the stress, is it as simple as that? Or do you can I suppose the symptoms last once the stress is reduced?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So for some people, it will simply be stress is the trigger of their IBS. And if they manage their stress, the IBS tends to dissipate. However, for other people, it will often be a bit of a mix of both. And, in clinical practice, sometimes you can't get rid of someone's stress. Maybe they've got a quite, full-on job that they need to continue working in, whether they enjoy it or whether it's to pay the bills or whatever.
Or it might be caring for a sick in-law or whatever it may be.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's so many different stresses in life. So sometimes making some dietary changes can be a factor that we use to help with managing the symptoms that somebody is experiencing. And other lifestyle things can also help with alleviating symptoms of IBS. So for example, being regularly physically active can be really helpful. So whether that's going for a walk, yoga in particular has been shown in research to be quite helpful for reducing symptoms of IBS. And, if you think about yoga, part of it is that mindfulness and sort of helping you to relax, but also, you've got your little poses where you're twisting your body around.
Yes.
And so that can sometimes help with giving your digestive system a bit of a gentle massage, if you like, to help with reducing some of the symptoms that you might be experiencing as well.
We'll be back after this short break with more from Chloe. Now, if listeners are, suffering from some IBS style symptoms and they are interested in, food, manipulating your diet to support your gut health, tell us what is the FODMAP diet and why is it good for managing these symptoms?
Yeah, so the low-FODMAP diet is a diet which was, it's been shown in research to help with alleviating symptoms of IBS. And around 70% of people with IBS will find symptom improvement from a low-FODMAP diet. So some of the high FODMAP foods, which are commonly in most people's diets, are things like apples, pears, onion, garlic, bread, pasta, milk, yogurt. I could go on and on. So there's a lot of really common everyday foods which are high FODMAP foods. The really important thing to remember, though, is a low FODMAP diet is not a long-term diet.
Okay.
So the process needs to be and I'd encourage you to work with a dietitian or a health professional experienced in this for advice. It's very important to do an elimination phase where you reduce the FODMAP load to make sure it's the right thing to do, and then move through the series of food challenges to work out which FODMAPs are a trigger for you. And the reason for that is you may not be sensitive to all of the FODMAPs. It might just be one or two. And then it means you can bring all of these other things back into your diet at will. But also, even with the things that you are sensitive to, it doesn't mean you can never eat them again. It's about working out what your tolerance level is. And this is particularly important because a lot of the high FODMAP foods also happen to be rich in prebiotics.
Okay.
Now, prebiotics are a type of fiber which ferment in your gut and help to feed the healthy bacteria to keep your gut really healthy. So never eating these things, whilst it might alleviate some of your symptoms, it can actually have a detrimental impact. So what we need to do is work out An example that I often use is with onion. It might feel like you can't have any onion, but maybe it's putting like a quarter of an onion in the stir fry that you're making that is otherwise a low FODMAP stir fry, or maybe not. Maybe it's got other high FODMAP things in there, and maybe it's just a quarter of one that's making 4 serves, and you start to do that maybe once or twice a week. And then over time, you increase the onion frequency and also increase the onion portion. And over time, most people tend to be able to find that they can increase the amount of foods that they were previously not able to tolerate. This is a time-consuming task, though. It's not going to happen overnight, but it's really worthwhile doing, because incorporating these prebiotic-rich foods into your diet, as I mentioned before, is really important for optimizing your gut health.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it does sound quite a tricky diet to follow. I mean, it can be restrictive and hard, and if you're stressed out already, finding time for it. I mean, how should we approach it?
Yeah, so I strongly encourage anyone who's considering this to get assistance from an accredited practicing dietitian to help with managing these symptoms. I created the FODMAP Challenge, which is an online course to help people through this process, and it's now got its home over at Healthy Life. But it's a program which is able to be a support alongside working with a healthcare professional to help you through the process. So, whether you're needing to go through that whole low FODMAP elimination challenge, or whether it's looking at some of the other things that you might be able to do from a lifestyle side of things, or adjusting fiber intake, there's a number of different things you can do there.
What sort of time period are we looking at when we're talking about eliminating foods? I mean, how long should you give your body to work out whether it is detrimental, the food is detrimental to your body or not?
Yeah, so with FODMAPs, we usually eliminate for 2 weeks. There's some research that's been done with elimination for 6 and 4. Sometimes I might make it slightly longer than 2, depending on the individual, but usually 2 weeks is ample time to see removal, reduction in symptoms, a potential withdrawal symptom where you might get a little bit of a flare, but then for that to settle again. And, I know it's not a long time, but also we want to keep that elimination as short as possible because of the impact it can have on your microbiota. So removal is short, challenge as quickly as you can. And again, life can get in the way. So sometimes that's not as quick as you'd like it to be. The whole process, you can get through it in around 3 months.
Okay.
Sometimes it might take longer if, life gets in the way. But also sometimes you might be able to do it with a little bit less time as well. If, for example, if you already know that you're lactose intolerant, you won't need to do a lactose challenge because you are aware of that. So there's challenges that you might skip for things that you are already aware of. So,
gosh, the gut is just such a precious thing, isn't it? When you're talking about it, we just really need to look after it, don't we? And I don't think we probably do enough. And I think it's great now that we're having these open conversations about gut health, and more conversations and more interest that, we can work out what works for you individually, because everybody's different.
Exactly right. And I think that's one of the really key things to think about is we're all individuals, and, there's different things that people may be able to tolerate more or less of. But, overall, eating a beautiful array of plants that you're able to well tolerate is going to really help with optimizing your gut health. And if you need to modify it for your FODMAP intake based on your individual tolerance level, then nothing wrong with doing that, but ensuring that you're getting some help along the way with that too, so that you're not unnecessarily restricting your diet.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, just quickly, we talked about this in Healthyish, but I thought you gave a wonderful answer. What foods do you eat weekly, daily, monthly to maintain a healthy gut?
Yeah, sure. So the research shows that eating a diverse array of plants is absolutely essential for optimizing your gut health. And the number there is 30 different plants. So this is 30 plants across the course of the week. Now, often when I say this to people, they're like, oh my gosh, that's
a
insane.
lot.
It is a lot. But when you think about it, it's not just fruit and veg, it's also whole grains, nuts, seeds, and legumes. So that suddenly means that there's a bit more variety than you might think, and it's maybe a little bit easier than you think. So personally, I just use notes section in my phone to keep a bit of a record. But there's really easy swaps that you can make. So, instead of buying brown rice on its own, it's getting the brown rice with quinoa, or you can get the little
I love those
rice cups that have
the multigrain mix.
Yeah, exactly. And so suddenly it becomes like, when you start to look at it through that lens, and not buying baby spinach on its own, maybe it's buying the 5-leaf salad mix. Again, suddenly you've got 5 rather than 1. And once you start to do that, suddenly it becomes easier and easier to hit that 5. That 30 different across the course of the week.
Chloe, great tips. Thank you. I'm off to buy my 5-grain salad mix, 5-leaf salad mix. Thank you so much for coming on Extra Healthyish.
Thank you so much for having me, Felicity.
Well, there you have it, 60 plants. Come on, I challenge you. Try and get those in your diet next week. In fact, I'm going to start doing that notes thing. That was actually quite a genius idea, just making notes of the plants you actually eat. Look, if you want to know more about Chloe's gut health program on Healthy Life, I will leave links in the show notes. If you want more from us, remember Extra Healthyish. We publish a new episode of this every morning, Monday to Thursday. For more info, head to bodyandsoul.com.au or join the conversation via Body and Soul on Instagram or Facebook. Thanks again for listening to my chat with Chloe. And if you have a moment, we would love it if you could rate a review and subscribe to this podcast. And until tomorrow, get your plants in and stay extra healthy-ish.